Hugh Ruthven, how are you?
I'm good, Mark. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. Living the life of a entrepreneur, consultant guy. Not working too hard, wasting your time on things like this.
Perfect. Either you'd be wasting it or I'd be wasting it, so it doesn't make any
We may
difference.
as well. It's either this or we play guitar, right?
That's right.
Exactly. So, welcome to the show. You're a brand DIY member. I dragged you kicking and screaming in here, and I want to introduce you to the other members of the group. For everyone in brand DIY, Hugh and I have known each other for quite a while. We worked together at DDB advertising, where Hugh was on client side, and then he actually went into management. He ran the agency. And then he went over and he went to work at McDonald's, and he ran all the marketing for McDonald's. So pretty big deal. And a few years later, he decided to move to Gilligan Island like me. And we've been living in Victoria, just down the street from each other, until he moved, so we couldn't walk to each other's house. And you've been working on a ton of different projects here. You and I worked on a very big project when we launched the BC government's healthcare innovation platform. And now you've been working on, I think you're actually working on a new one, but I remember one of the last big projects that you were on that just blew me away. You worked on a really big medical cannabis company, or a really big cannabis company. So what I want to bring you on for, the people in this group, mainly entrepreneurs, founders, SMEs, startups, and you have got just a pant load of big world marketing experience. And then you've taken all that expertise and you've applied it to scrappy startups like this cannabis company. I want to talk about what the folks here can learn about how you've transposed big world marketing, or old, big brand marketing, into something like cannabis. So there you go. That's the intro. Did I butcher it?
No, I think it's good. I mean, I think it's really interesting. You and I sort of worked in the big agency world, and it's evolved so much. I think the one thing that you have, of course, with those clients, not all of them, but the likes of McDonald's, is you've got a sort of annual collection of funds for marketing, et cetera. So you're not really budget restricted. So I think the really interesting thing is that you have the same challenges with smaller clients, but you have to be a lot more nimble, and I think a lot more disciplined in terms of the kind of spending that you're doing and what you're doing. And so, the brand part of it, in terms of the brand discovery work and the brand articulation work, has to be spot on, because you don't really with McDonald's, you can take a couple of runs at it. And in fact, they kind of encourage you to do that. But I think, from a startup standpoint, it's really important to get it right from the start. And not to digress too much, but I always really encourage clients to do a lot of discovery work. I think, the number one thing of marketing professionals that they probably do not do enough of is the front end discovery work, which, if you do right, will really lead to a lot of strategic insights, which will enable you to build your strategic platform that you can drive right down through the organization. So I just finished a project I was doing the discovery and the articulation, but I'm just working on some of the implementation for the Land Title Survey Authority of the province, and, talking to everybody from surveyors to paralegals to lawyers to their C-suite, and really getting, over 40 hours of interviews, of really getting a very good grasp of their organization and the culture, and where they need to go. And it's just really smart work done up front that will enable you to move more quickly and more on strategy of where you need to go, I think.
Now, the discovery we're talking about, though, is straight up interview research and secondary research. This isn't to be confused with the sort of, we talk about this in tech a lot, where you have the customer discovery process, where you roll out a minimum viable product, and then you engage the customers to tell you what they think should be fixed on it. You bring it back to them, back and forth, until eventually you come up with a product that everybody actually wants. So that's not the same sort of discovery, even though you do that too.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of that. Where I'm usually more focused on vision and mission and strengths and differentiation and really the positioning of the value proposition of the business, and really being able to articulate that and getting a collective belief through the organization of really what do we do well, where do we need to go, where are the opportunities. So sort of getting that 360 sweep around the product from everybody from, I did with Land Titles Office, for example, I did, probably 5 or 6, when I say focus groups, they weren't traditional focus groups. They were more fireside chats with employees about where things need to go. But everybody from the C-suite to employees to then, a broad stroke of their stakeholders. Mm-hmm. And that works usually more focused on kind of what's the soul of the organization and what are we trying to do here and really what makes us unique. And so that kind of work.
Now, working on McDonald's, I don't remember us ever doing anything like that. I remember having test markets where we would try out new burgers and stuff like that. But is it because that these big brands, they kind of, it was such a commoditized product and the competitors were so well established that we didn't really have to dig that far into the psychology of the people?
Yeah, I mean, we did tracking research with McDonald's, mostly identifying quantitative stuff like market share, competitive growth, all that kind of stuff, but not really the rich qualitative work. I did quite a bit of work with Vision Critical too. I did some rebranding for them. The line we came up with was Collective Wisdom Starts Here. And they, of course, run panels, and everybody from Banana Republic, John Deere Tractor, like they've got a lot of clients that are on an ongoing basis providing input on ongoing weekly panels on product development and testing things. Like with the Banana Republic, for example, they had forums on, what's the perfect black dress for women, and they had groups of women that would come in and critique on things. So that kind of ongoing dialogue we never had at McDonald's. Of course, really the advent of where the internet's gone and the abilities of those kinds of companies to work with their forums on an ongoing basis and getting much more immediate direct feedback and guidance and stewardship in regards to product launches and all that thing. They're just we're just way ahead of where we were in the early McDonald's days.
Now, what do you think about, when I worked in green marketing, the whole sustainability thing, we had pant loads of research that told us that if people had their choice, they would pick a green product, and they didn't. If I had a nickel for every survey that said people would buy this product and didn't, do you think I just see that there's this amazing new capacity to put stuff out there relatively cheaply to see if it actually works, if people will actually pull out their credit card versus people telling you that they'll put out their credit card. I see that as a huge, not untapped. A lot of people are tapping it, but I just see it as such a great way to do living research. Now that versus interviews. I'm a big believer in interviews. I love interviews. That's what I do. Mm-hmm. But do you think that, do you think the living research where you actually put something out there, try it out, is better than the interviews, or do you think they're both?
I think they've got kind of different purposes, if you're really trying to get to the sort of deep knowledge and understanding. And we've talked about different models of acquaintances and friends and lovers and different levels of connection with brands. So I think you need to kind of do both. I think your green example is people have great intentions and they also want to be seen as green advocates, but when the behavior kind of hits the road sometimes, and everything I've seen is unless it's price comparable, they won't even consider it. So you have to pay an extra premium for it, irrespective of the fact that it's green. A lot of people won't do it. But I think your question is a good one. I think the ability now to get products onto the market and test them at a very early stage. And there's this whole thing, obviously, in this brand movement of co-collaboration with customers and customers taking a genuine interest in the brand because they felt that they're impacting the brand in terms of input and all that. I think that's all really important. So I think that piece of it is, I've not done a ton of it, but I think it can be really powerfully used.
Now, With the green thing, which was I found especially dangerous, is when we put stuff out there. A lot of the time, my clients wouldn't have any trouble selling the product. And what they do, they'd sell like the Dickens in the early adopter phase. So
Yeah.
they would pick up 3% of the market, the values-based consumers, and then they'd think they were a shoe-in and they were a big success, and boom, they sell all the early adopter stuff and everything would stop, because then they'd hit the early mainstream and yeah, you know,
Yeah.
early adopters will buy deodorant that leaves you stinky. They'll buy floor cleaner that doesn't clean. You know, they'll buy stuff because of their values. And, you know, I thought that was pretty darn interesting too. My sort of first foray into, you know, this emerging market. Let's talk about cannabis, the emerging market.
Right.
And did this throw all your old world sort of marketing stuff for a loop, or is it fully consistent?
No, I think it's very consistent. I think it's a whole new world out there. I think there was a gigantic expectation that it was going to take the world by storm. I think the whole Canadian legalization, to some degree, it's been a bit of a snore. I think for a whole bunch of reasons. I think there was so much built up expectation around it. I mean, I think irrespective of country, cannabis consumption is somewhere between about 15 and 20% of the total population. So this isn't like eggs, right? Or milk. And I think there's a whole bunch of things going on. First of all, there's a huge stigma around it from the 60s and the 70s, and of course what regulation had done, and it was a substance one, regulation up with heroin and cocaine and everything else. So I think it's I think the trajectory or the future for cannabis is very, very bright. I think it's going to be in the most interesting areas. Probably the medical market is going to be the most beneficial. So there are orphan illnesses and everything from seizures and cluster headaches and certainly anxiety and depression and all those areas where they need to get the mix right of the various strain, the actual the terpenes. So the formulations of what the right product's going to be against those various ailments. Because you see anecdotal stuff on YouTube of the guy who's got Parkinson's and he takes an edible or whatever, and within half an hour he's completely normal. You would see him as normal versus what he was. So there's a couple of things going on when you think of the traditional rules of marketing. Is who is that? What's the product really all about? How can it really be differentiated? So right there you have a problem, because you're looking at cannabis to a great extent is cannabis. And there's a lot of talk about the endocannabinoid system. There's a lot of talk about sativas versus indicas and the effect and the different receptors in the body, one being more of a head high, of course, and one being more the central nervous system. So, the universities, of course, have not had any access to product for testing for the last, 30 years. And that's where it's all going to change, because big pharma is going to come into it, have already come into it. And they're going to do a much better job of deciding really what are the ailments that cannabis can be used for, where is the efficacy based, and then what are the kind of delivery platforms in terms of vaporizing or strips or whatever. But so I said it's about the differentiation, and it's also about target marketing. And you talked before the call about target marketing, and I think what's interesting is it's really going to be based very much on ailment related stuff, as opposed to a traditional sort of demographic and age and income and all that. But certainly, even on that side, what we've seen is there's a lot of interest, obviously, on the aging population, and looking for alternative medicine of what they can use and not taking drugs and the side effect of drugs.
Now,
So
let me
that's
interrupt.
kind of part of it.
Let me interrupt. I'm a chronic interrupter. That was a big one. And I think that is super, super relevant to people who are building their own brand, taking control of their own brand. I remember the big deal was who is the primary secondary market for CBD THC, and is it going to be the casual user who wants to get high? Is it going to be the medical person? Is it going to be mom with a bad knee? And I remember there was a lot of back and forth on that, and I never really got a ton of clarity. But I do remember working on stuff to make dispensaries more welcoming and make the ordering process more welcoming to people who are 65 years old. Because we thought, well, that's going to be the market that just pushes it through. If we can get them over the speed bump of, uh-oh, it's pot. I remember doing it with my mom, who's like 80 years old, and I gave her CBDs for aches and pains. She wouldn't take them because she thought she'd become, like reefer madness. And she did,
Of course.
but but I don't want to talk about that. Talk to me about that, the whole idea of segmentation and targeting specific groups. And I mean, it's something you're really, really good at.
Well, I mean, first of all, the younger audience has essentially grown up with cannabis. It's always been around. Certainly when you and I grew up, it was much more of a sort of stealth, dark world. It was a gateway drug, all those other conceptions or kind of what it was all about, perception, sorry. And so I think that first of all, the aging market that knew about it in the 60s has now come back and revisiting it. So the figures that I saw, for example, out of Washington over the border was the largest increase in terms of when things were legalized was really a lot of older people coming in and really wanting to find out what was this all about. Do I have to smoke it? No, I can take it in a gummy, all those kinds of things. So what the delivery mechanism, people that weren't smokers, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. And I think your point on the stores is a good one. If I heard once and heard 100 times of, oh, our stores are going to be the Apple stores of cannabis, meaning making them these slick, beautiful, more spa-like, more boutique, everything certainly totally opposed to, loose cannabis being in jars and all that kind of past world in the early dispensary world. So market-wise, it was kind of, what's your distribution strategy? Is it dispensaries? Could it be, certainly longer term over the counter? You look at what Shoppers Drug Mart is doing, certainly the leader in Canada in terms of what they're doing. But I think a big part of it, and I talked about this some time ago, is just really getting the medical community, doctors and clinicians aligned to being open-minded about, about cannabis. I talked to this young intern, she's probably in her mid-20s, and she just, crapped all over cannabis. But of course, it's not even any part of her learning.
No, it's like natural. It's like natural health. The whole thing is it's all pills for an illness, not supplements or holistic things to keep you healthy, as opposed.
Yeah, and I think sort of we're a bit of a swimming all over the place, but there's the whole recreational market, which is going to do it for what they want to do. I mean, let's face it, if anybody's doing it, everybody's medicating. That they're medicating for stress or it can be pain. But that's the recreational market. And the medical market, I think, will do really well when it's become, producing products which are much, much more attuned to what traditional drug delivery is, which is, the things that doctors were concerned about is where is this coming from? What's in it? What are the contaminants that potentially could be in it? What is the right delivery methodologies? And lastly, kind of what's the dosage? How are we getting a consistent dosage? Because if you have to take, half a 7.5 milligram sleeping pill to get to sleep, you know exactly what that dosage is. With cannabis, it's not been that way. And so that's part of the whole challenge, I think, that the market's had.
So you bring it around, and what I'm hearing from you, one, it's never been more important to sit down and do good customer discovery. I mean, the faster the market moves, the more entrepreneurial companies get. You want to sit down and talk to people and say, are you using this? Are you using this a lot? Who's using this? Do you know anybody who's using it? Why are they using it? Dig deep. And do you do a lot of secondary research too, or is it mainly just interview and fireside? I love the fireside chat thing.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, with the whole launch of cannabis in Canada, there was a lot of paid for quantitative research by large security firms, everything in terms of looking at investment opportunities and, you know, who was the bullseye cannabis user. I mean, it's interesting. One market that's growing a lot too that I've heard about, you know, certainly is young women are dealing with depression and anxiety, and they've over-indexed versus, you know, men of the same age, and it's very common with women in their 20s and 30s. And so, you know, they're looking for answers. It's interesting because it's an example of a not a 50-50 market. Again, you know, men have used it for post-traumatic disorder, all those kinds of things. So it's a very interesting drug because there's a lot of obviously psychological or and versus, you know, physiological impacts. So there's some that are just purely wanting to use it for pain, and others that that are using it for the mental relief and the relaxation of what it is.
You know, it's funny. We used to joke when I was working. I've worked on like I think 3 or 4 different cannabis projects now. The big joke was it's incredible how many young men have chronic back pain now. 24-year-old guys on a Friday night, they're all just crippled by back pain.
Yeah, I
I've
mean,
never
the
seen
funny
anything like
thing
it.
about it is there's going to be discipline. There's discipline in the category now. The medical community is more open, obviously, to embracing it if there's, you know, proper clinical studies and clinical trials, and the efficacy by the specific formulations are proven against specific ailments. So there, you know, I think we've certainly gone through that phase of cannabis is good for everything, you know, and you know, the long list of ailments that it can help. But the company I'm working with now is looking very specifically at various, you know, specific applications, and then looking at very, very specific IP related formulations that can actually, you know, work against those those physical, those conditions, those health
So
conditions.
if I was to wrap this up and bring it home, you've got somebody who's running a startup with a new app or a new SaaS product, or God only knows, a new pair of sweat socks that are miracle sweat socks. Lessons from your experience working in big brands, working in fast moving, often controversial brands. What would you hand out as advice? Because I mean, you're an expert, you know what you're doing. What would you tell a founder or an entrepreneur who's in that spot?
Well, you got to know your audience really, really, really well. And then I would encourage them to set up sort of an ongoing, as you said, Mark, whether it's an ongoing panel or something, that there's this continuous feedback loop when you're in development, right? So that's the first thing, is I think you really need that ongoing knowledge loop that's coming back to you through your stakeholders. I think you have to be, obviously, this is basic marketing 101, but you obviously need to be very aware of what your competitive set's doing, and really honing in on, you know, how differentiated is this product? How necessary is this product? Does the world really need this product? I think you've got to be your own worst, you know, devil's advocate in regards to, you know, what really is the benefit? What's the functional and the social and the emotional benefit of this thing? What is it doing in the world that really provides value? So, you know, that ongoing discussion. And then I think you got to stay really fluid. I think, you know, most people are like, oh my God, great, my brand's done, that's perfect. And you know, most brands, and McDonald's was quite good at this. You know, whoever thought initially McDonald's was going to be in the salad business, right? It just didn't connect, right? No, you go there for a quarter pounder, but what we found out, there was these people called visit blockers, that if 5 of them were going and you didn't have a salad, you'd lose all 5 visits, not just the one. And so my point is, I think really good brands stay quite nimble, and you've talked about this forever, really zigging and zagging and being able to stay fluent with their audiences. And you know, I hate the word authenticity because it's overused. You know, that's critical in terms of just values of the brand. And you got to understand, when people are on this boat with you, they're really committing to the values of this. It depends if it's, you know, If it's a wrench, I don't think that's the case. But if it's an emotional product with an emotional benefit, they're making a commitment to you as a brand because it's really a lifestyle brand that they want to make part of their lifestyle. And so, you know, I think that part of it of really keeping a very, very tight ongoing dialogue with your customers and being able to respond quickly.
They give you everything you want if you just ask.
Yeah, I mean, I always joke when I do a lot of strategy work for clients, and then if I go in and present a strategy deck, I say, well, if this is wrong, you guys have nobody to blame but yourself, because you've just told me what it was, and all my job was to synthesize it and tell you really kind of what boiled, if I do a 67-page report in the executive summary, what are the 6 or 7 things that boil to the top that really should lead this process for us? What are the really important things that we've got to dig into here? Awesome. And, you know, when I do that amount of research, some clients go, this was fantastic, but nothing surprises me, which is a good thing, meaning that they know the brand quite well. And then there'll be clients that go, wow, I had no idea that this was going on. And so I think also, Mark, I don't mean to go on and on about it, but it really gets everybody tied in and committed to the process if you're disciplined about it. It's not some outside consultant coming in and in 15 minutes saying, oh, here's what you should do with your brand. I've had meetings where I've walked in and the president said to me, well, you know our brand. Tell me about it. What do you think about it? And I said, well, no, I don't actually. I said, it would be irresponsible for me to give you a point of view on it. I can tell you what I think, but I want to tell you what collectively people think about your brand.
Hugh, that's all the time we have for.
Wow.
But I want to make sure that you're out there, you're at Brand DIY. If folks are looking at figuring out what they stand for, they can reach out to you, right? For sure. Yeah. And I love doing the work. I'm super passionate about it. And it's always super interesting. It's always my favorite part of the work because I'm curious by nature, and it really, for me, starts to solidify the strategic piece in a much more disciplined way. Awesome, man. So, but I enjoy your time. Always enjoy you, Mr. Stoiber. Thank you so much. I was closing thought. I too have found you curious by nature as well. So thank you. Okay, Mark, have a great day. See you, Hugh. Okay, buddy. Thanks. Bye. Thanks for the call.